So anyway, Rome has just produced a warrior, which I didn't really want, but I'll fortify it there and go back to building settlers. Here, I gotta switch value to settlers as well. I'm also going to have to build a whole bunch of workers to build up the land because, as I think I mentioned in the introduction, resources are really important, and without mines, for example, and farms and so on, you can't actually use the resources. They don't just magically support you. In addition, getting cities to grow is much more difficult in Civilization 3. They really need the land around them developed, and water is less plentiful too because you can't irrigate with ocean water, which is realistic, except it's not entirely clear where your fresh water is. That's the problem. So initially, I've scored very badly in these summaries of the best of this and that in the world. But as you'll see later in the playthrough, I do fine once my civilization starts to grow, which was the whole point. Because as in Civilization 1 and 2, maybe the most important thing that you need in Civilization 3 is land. But you can argue that it's even more important in Civilization 3 because you absolutely must have all the natural resources that you need. Because without them, no matter how advanced your civilization, you can't build anything that you need without the resources. So Rome builds a settler. Now I'm being a little bit more careful in making sure that I continue building settlers. Obviously, in Civilization 1 and 2, your default new production was the same as your old production. Now I noticed these mineral resources down here, so I have to respond to those. So I'm going to build a city down there to support some mines. Of course, in Civilization 1 or 2, I would be building the mines to support the city. But in this version of the game, the mines are actually more important than the city. So more settlers. Of course, in hindsight, I probably should have built workers first to start work on the mines right away. But I was being very careful to develop as many cities as possible before the land was taken by rivals. Another settler. See, this is the problem of inadequate growth. So what I do... Why is this hesitating? What I do is build a worker. And I lose production shields, but it's necessary so that that city can grow. So, more roads. And I built a warrior without my wanting it to. Or did it? No, it switched to warriors, but it's going to. Because I wasn't being arguably careful enough in managing the production of these cities. With Rome, I'm going to intervene here. There's quite a lot that you can automate in Civilization 3 and the later Civilization games, actually. This is one of the criticisms I've heard of Civilization 6. I haven't actually played it yet, but Civilization 6 takes the automation to such an extent that people say the game plays you. So, I don't know how true that is. I'm going to have to see about that. what is true is that as the games have developed, in some ways you have less freedom instead of more in terms of what you're able to do with the civilization you're building. Civilization 5, for example, won't allow more than one unit in your garrison in a city, which to me seems highly unrealistic, but the developers say that having more than one unit in one place is a stack of doom, which never really made any sense to me. I mean, I don't see how that's negative in any way whatsoever. It's both realistic and necessary to secure your society, but up to Civilization 4 you can put as many units as you like in a city as long as you can support them. And this might be the reason why Civilization 4 has the best ratings of any Civilization game on Steam. But in any case, we're still playing Civilization 3 here. So Kumai is still struggling here. I've chosen to delay production. Don't want a spearman, I want more settlers. So I noticed some gold over there, so that's a good place to go and build a city. But in the meantime, I'm going to take care of this other mine here, or potential mine site. And I'm going to build a worker to take care of all that. This settler is near some resources, but he's going to explore a little bit more. So Kumai is still struggling to produce that settler. So what do I do? Zoom to Kumai, worker. That volcano, luckily, is dormant for the moment. I was worried at first that it might pose a real threat to Rome there, but it seems to be just far enough away so that it's only a nuisance. The bottom line is that when you start a civilization game, in any version of the game, your first city basically has to be built immediately. Otherwise, you're going to be postponing your own growth, which is one of the worst things that you can do. As I said, especially in the early stages of the game, you have to prioritize growth over everything else. There's someone. I'm going to avoid them for the moment. One of the problems with Civilization 3 is that it's not entirely clear the nationality of a unit when you see one compared to Civilization 1 and 2 where they're always color-coded. Or more accurately, it's kind of hard to see the colors. I suppose they're theoretically color-coded in Civilization 3, but it's much harder to see them. I think that my color is red here, if I'm not mistaken. Which is kind of funny because in Civilization 1 and 2, red is always the color of the barbarians. So, surveying my cities here. All producing settlers, except for Pompeii, which is producing a worker. So I'm going to automate this worker to avoid having to search for water. I'll just let the computer do that for me. Settler automation was introduced in Civilization 2. In this case it would be worker automation, but it's the same idea. It isn't really as necessary in Civilization 2 though, so I've only occasionally used it if at all. But automation of units is something that becomes very useful, at least from Civilization 3 onwards, when the process of developing land becomes a lot more complex. Basically, the automation takes the complexity out of it. Basically, if you use automation, you at least know you're getting the most out of your land, to the extent that your circumstances allow. We're almost done with this part, but things seem to be going quite well. Better than I expected, really.